What's up, everybody? Lou from Hypocritic here on the show floor at PAX Unplugged 2024 here at the PAX Rising Showcase. We are here with Thomas from Gameswell
Hello.
to talk about PNW. Thank you so much for taking some time this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Having a good time. First day, so.
Yes,
Yeah.
glad to hear it. So for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about PNW.
Yeah, so this is a collection of card games that are inspired by the Pacific Northwest. It's 6 games that I designed with modern game mechanics, but you can play them with just a standard deck of cards, a normal 52 card deck. And, yeah.
So let's start there. So a fusion of, like you said, modern game mechanics with just a standard 52 card deck. What was the inspiration for kind of grafting on these different sort of mechanics to a set of cards that basically everyone would have laying around their house?
Yeah, so I started with the first game, Cabin by the Sea, is a solitaire game. I did that at a game jam where the rules were your game had to fit in a tweet. All of the rules had to fit in a tweet, which is very condensed. So I knew I needed something that was a familiar set of components that I didn't have to communicate to folks. So I started with a standard deck of cards, and it's a solitaire game where every turn a card washes up from the sea. You have to decide whether to use that card or use one of the cards from your supply or from the beach, and you're building stacks of cards over time. And I love the design constraints so much for me because it's like, well, I want to think about how do I want the game to feel, or what mechanics am I interested in? And then I can immediately say, like, these are the components. Like, I know right away these are the components. So there's a deck building game in the series, there's a worker placement game in the series, but I started everyone with just, I need to make this with a standard deck of cards.
That's fantastic. Really interesting sort of way to find a creative angle on using these very familiar sort of cards and mechanics that everyone knows, and then putting a kind of a fresh twist on them.
Thanks.
Cabin by the Sea, like you said, one of 6 games in this sort of pack that you've sort of designed, and then with different sort of player counts and mechanics and ways you go about using, again, just the standard 52 card deck. In designing each one of them, can you talk about, you don't have to go into detail on every one, but in general, sort of talk about the design process in coming up with that sort of collection of different games with different player counts, different objectives, mechanics, and making them all sort of come together in some sort of cohesive way.
Yeah, so a lot of them I started similarly with, a game mechanic in mind, let's say deck building, for instance. But very soon after, or even before, I would think about how does this fit into the theme that I've been going for. So I started with Cabin by the Sea. I am from Seattle. The illustrator of the book is also a Seattle local. So I wanted to do something that was very thematic and near and dear to my heart. So Cabin by the Sea, you can imagine like a cold beach with driftwood washed up on it. And so for the deck builder, for instance, I was thinking, well, a deck builder is all about how do you stay adaptable? How do you change your deck over time? And in this case, this maps very well to salmon. So salmon in the Pacific Northwest and other places, they start in the sea as adult salmon, and eventually they go back to their spawning grounds. And in order to do that, they have to adapt a lot through the course of their making their way back to the spawning grounds. And so you start as a sea stage salmon, and you're adding cards to your deck over time, and each round in the game is a different objective. So the first round, you have to do 4 of the same suit, for instance, and that's your objective. The second round is 3 pairs, and the third round is 8 cards in a row. And so you have to be able to say, I, as my salmon trying to reach my spawning grounds, need to stay adaptable to meet all of those 3 different conditions. And so, for instance, that's one example where I plugged the 2 together, where it's like, I love deck building. What makes a deck builder a deck builder? Like some sense of adaptability and trying to grow like your engine over time. And how does that fit into the PNW, the broader ecosystem that I'm building? And in that case, that's Salmon Run.
That's really clever and a really interesting way to, like I was saying before, make this kind of cohesive whole out of all these really interesting parts and disparate sort of gameplay elements. When you start to put these ideas in motion and craft the experience as you're building the games out, can you talk a little bit about the design and development process a little bit more as these mechanics sort of took shape? You decided on the few that we're going to kind of go after, walk us through things like playtesting, trial and error, getting it out at conventions in front of people. What was that entire process like for you?
Yeah, definitely. It is a journey for sure, right? So I usually start, if I'm building something out, like I have that idea in mind, and then I just put it on the table and I say, is this good enough for me to sling some cards around on my own? And usually the answer is no, and I make a few revisions and I play it 4 or 5 times. And then I show my wonderful partner, Kelly, and I'm like, is this good? And usually she's like, no, because it's not yet. So it needs to be like crafted and honed. And so I've made a lot of changes through the process. And then I usually take it and put it in front of friends and get a bunch of playtests that way. And then I usually take it out and play it at conventions. So the games in the book have over 500 playtests, and that's been like through a bunch of conventions like PAX West and others out in the Pacific Northwest especially. There's an organization that I'm a part of called Playtest Northwest that will get you as a designer into conventions so you can get your game in front of as many people as possible and get that feedback from strangers and help hone the game even more.
That's fantastic. So then for those who are going on their game creation journey, maybe for the first time or they're still kind of inexperienced at it, it sounds like those sort of groups where you can get playtesting feedback and more easily source kind of honest comments from players sounds really, really helpful. How did you go about integrating yourself into those groups and into those communities to start to get that feedback and make this sort of design process more feasible for you?
Yeah, the first game I made was during the pandemic, and it was a lot of online playtesting. And so that's actually how I got into the group, was via a Discord channel. I know there are others, like Unpub is one such group where you can try to like playtest your games, get people in front of your games. And so I would definitely recommend starting out, going to those places, whether it be a Discord channel or otherwise, and trying to playtest other people's games. Figure out how they are playtesting their games. And then from there, go in and say, well, I've got this game that I'd like to show off. Like, do that. And also make sure that, like, as you're part of this, you're, like, giving back to that portion of the community. So with Playtest Northwest, for instance, I've done hosting events at conventions where you stand up and you try to direct people to all the game designers' games. Where you're like, this is like a 30-second pitch for each of the games that are here. And, like, that really helps with your community as well. Like, it helps you grow your community, and it helps you pick and choose what you like from playtesting. You get to see other people playtesting their games and say like, I'm stealing that because that's a great tactic. That's a great use of playtesting.
That's awesome. That sounds like a very communal way to sort of help yourself and help others who are on the same journey along the way. That's awesome. Now, if I remember correctly when we were talking earlier, this is the first game that you're actually bringing to full sort of publication and launching as a finished product.
Yeah.
So when you go about exploring that for the first time, needing to come up with things like custom card art or rule books or the sort of accompaniments of a full product release that is unique and to your own liking, what's that process been like for you, needing to sort of walk through all the logistics and figure out how exactly to get it in players' hands as a finished product?
Yeah, I'll say, first of all, I'm very lucky that the illustrator, Megan Weir-Whedon, is as talented as she is. Incredible. But as far as the process, I actually recommend like start with sticky notes on like Pokemon cards that in sleeves. Like if you've got an idea and you just want to do it, scribble some stuff down and try it out. Like see if people like it, roll some dice, flip over some cards, stuff like that. You don't need art to start at all. And then when you're ready to like make that next step, make sure that you're getting it in front of people, that kind of thing. And then kind of explore like, is the theme that I'm going for going to fit with maybe an art style that I have in mind? And I would definitely recommend going to conventions like Comic-Cons and things like that. There's always an artist alley. It's a great way to look through and be like, there's tons of different styles here. Let's take a look at what would fit with my game, that kind of thing, and go from there. And in my case, the art direction that I wanted was Art Nouveau and like a field journal kind of style. So you can see it's like very much like a sketchbook, field journal, and Megan really knocked it out of the park, and that's definitely along the lines of what I wanted. So does that answer your question?
Absolutely, and that is gorgeous. Kudos to Megan on, on the art. It really is very pretty.
Our handle is the Creeping Moon, in case you want that.
There you go. Very important. Now, in terms of players actually experiencing all of this, getting their hands on it, you do have a Kickstarter that is live right now as we're recording this. Tell us a little bit about how players can go learn more about the game and contribute if they want to get their hands on it.
Yeah, so we launched a Kickstarter this morning, first day of PAX Unplugged, for 2 decks of playing cards, as well as this lovely book. So we've got a collection of Pacific Northwest themed playing cards featuring orcas and salmon and different trails from around the region as well. And so you can check that out on Kickstarter. It features all 6 of these games. We've got some how to play videos. We've got a free PDF download of the first game, and got some playing cards for you.
That is very, very exciting. Final question then. Is there a certain delivery sort of time frame or date that you have in mind to get the final product out to everybody?
Yeah, so we're expecting to get the files to the manufacturer in January. My deadline on the Kickstarter for starting fulfillment is June. And then, so we'll start fulfillment from there and hopefully be done by September, like to the last folks. Of 2025, I should say.
Fantastic. So then not a whole lot of runway left for you. Maybe then one kind of tack-on question. How long have you been working on this game? And what does it sort of feel like to have seemingly a real light at the end of the tunnel here in terms of, formal deadlines? I'm getting this done by X, it's going to be out in players' hands soon.
Yeah. I would say we started 3 years ago doing playtesting, making sure the games were good, and then adding art in after that. making sure that everything was like up to what we wanted. And we actually did a Kickstarter for the book of card games in March. And so trying to take it bite-sized, where we knew we wanted to get a deck of cards that was all themed and nice, but also the core being like the book and the card games, and get that out first. And then from there, we have like a launching point to say like, oh, now we want to do our lovely themed deck of cards, and that's what's available now. So I definitely recommend that kind of thing, to keep it bite-sized. And it's been good for us. So hopefully, as you say, short runway. I hope the second one goes well. But with that short runway, we're also excited to turn it around and give it to backers faster. So that's what we're excited about.
Makes a lot of sense. Best of luck with that. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks,
Keep
Luke.
it tuned here for more from PAX Unplugged all weekend long.